Explore the history, relationships, expertise, and data that go into ensuring Stine growers get maximum yield potential. This is the Stine Seedcast. Here's your host, David Thompson.
Hello, and welcome to the Stine Seedcast. I'm David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stine Seed Company. Today, our guest on the Seedcast is Hart Hauge, Regional Sales Agronomist for Stine. Thanks for joining us, Hart.
Hey, David. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I want to note that today's conversation is the start of a new series on the Seedcast we're calling Agriculture Around the U.S. Our goal with this series is to bring listeners agronomic information from all of Stine's trade territory. So be on the lookout for more episodes in this series coming in the future. Today, Hart joins us remotely from his home office in Silver Springs, Maryland. As an RSA, Hart provides crop management knowledge and agronomic support to Stine's independent sales representatives in the area. Hart and his team cover Region 28, which is one of Stine's newer regions, which includes the Upper East Coast. Today, Hart will share what farming is like in this region, how it's different from where he grew up in the Midwest, and the opportunities available to Stine growers in the eastern states. So, let's get started. Well, Hart, appreciate having you on the Seedcast. And to get us started, I always like to ask for a little bit of background. So if you would, give us a quick up to speed on your background and your path to Stine Seed Company.
Sure. So I grew up in the Red River Valley in northern Minnesota. Grew up around farming pretty much my entire childhood and early adolescent. And that, I think, is really what instilled the passion for agriculture in general in me. When I graduated high school, I got a job with West Central Ag Services there in northern Minnesota, where they primarily handled Stine soybeans at the location that I was working at. So I got a real good look at Stine soybeans, how they were perceived by the growers in that area. And that at that time was initially when the E3s were being launched. So we had some of the first seed stock of the early group maturity beans that Stine was bringing to the industry. So we got to see that first year. And then within 2 years, our location was primarily Stine E3 soybeans. So I worked with West Central Ag Services throughout my college career. And once I graduated college, it was time to look for a job. I was looking kind of throughout Minnesota, and I found a position that aligned with where I wanted to be down in central Minnesota as an ISR for Stine Seed. I got in touch with the RSA down there at the time, and within a couple months I was down there. I started July 1st of 2020, right when COVID had started. So that was interesting. I spent about 2.5 years down in central Minnesota as an ISR, and I was scrolling online one day and I happened to see an ad for an RSA position out on the East Coast. And I decided to inquire about that, got talking with my now current boss, Ben Grinnell, and we had some conversations back and forth, got in touch with Clint Bounds, and within 2 months, I was out here on April of last year. So that is how I became an RSA for Stine.
So you talked about starting with us as an ISR, which in our world is an independent sales rep, and now you serve as a RSA, which is a regional sales agronomist for Stine. I wonder if you just talk about a little bit about your current role and what it is an RSA does for Stine Seed Company.
Sure. So when I first got out here, we had a few reps that were in the region, but we really didn't have a huge footprint in Pennsylvania and New York. So I was tasked with going out and locating potential candidates to move product for us. And that, really that looked like almost like a sales position, because when you're out talking with people, sometimes you're working with guys that come from a different company or they're farming and they're not really sure if they want to take on something like selling seed. So it's really about getting in front of them and having conversation about what makes Stine so great, the products that they're bringing to the industry, and how we can have a mutual relationship that would benefit the both of us. So after those initial conversations that you have with those potential candidates, they decide, hey, I'd like to join Stine's team, which is great. We love having people who are excited to sell our product. And from there, you're really taking them from almost knowing nothing about Stine, aside from maybe what they've heard, to bringing them through the process of, what does our product lineup look like? How does our sales process work? How does shipping seed work? All of that gets encompassed into what we do on a day-to-day business. The seed business, seed world is always an ongoing process of, learning new products that we're bringing into the lineup. But really, this meant for me spending a lot of one-on-one time with these guys, trying to get them comfortable with telling the Stine story, what makes us different versus the rest of the industry. Currently, a majority of my time now is spent, fielding calls from ISRs to help them navigate their business, to ensure that, their customers' needs are being met.
So when you started, you had a couple of folks out there that were already there, and then one of your biggest missions has been to grow your team out there on the East Coast. And how many ISRs do you have on your team there in Region 28 today?
So when I first came out here, we had 4 members on the team, and currently we have 12. Really what that looks like is, 20, because a lot of these guys have other people helping them. There's just a lot of hands involved in what we do as a team. So I get to work with a variety of different people from in Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont. There's just a lot of hands involved with what we're doing.
So Hart, you live and work on the East Coast now for Stine Seed Company, but as we talked about at the top, you're not originally from there. You came from Minnesota. So I guess I'm curious, in your observation, what are the things you've noticed that make corn and soybean production in the upper eastern states unique relative to maybe where you grew up?
So I think the biggest change that I noticed from moving from the valley to the East Coast was the amount of acres that are either minimally tilled or reduced tillage. That was not commonplace for what I was used to. I would say in the valley, 99+% of the acres are conventionally tilled. So kind of learning how that's incorporated into their production practices was interesting for me. And my first few months out here, I was asking a lot of questions.
So are there particular practices as it relates to either corn or soybeans that you notice being significantly different in the area you're in now relative to where you came from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where I came from, pretty much everything was taken for grain, shelled in the fall, brought to the elevator, marketed that way. Whereas when I got out here, I noticed that there's a lot more silage being grown, which for those people who are accustomed to the sugar beet that you were talking about earlier, it's a very similar process. You get in, you open the fields up, and you get trucks coming in, and you load the silage trucks with that. So actually a fun little stat on the silage acres grown out here in the areas that I cover, at least. Vermont, 88% of the corn acres are grown for silage. New York, we're at 45%, and then in Pennsylvania, 35%. So we see a lot of silage because of the presence of dairies out here. And then another thing on the soybean side, same thing, Midwest, everything goes for grain, or most things go for grain. Out here, you see a little more plenish acres being planted for feeding those dairies. So you're seeing a lot more crop production geared towards animal production versus just strictly grain production to be delivered to the elevator.
Wondering a little bit hard about, again, the climate in the area that you serve in that upper part of the eastern U.S. What do you see there relative to maybe, again, what you're used to coming from the Midwestern Corn Belt, and how does that impact any of the farming practices that you guys see in the area?
Sure. Yeah. So something I've kind of found interesting out here, especially in, Pennsylvania, and you see it up in New York too, but the humidity levels remain very high throughout the growing season. And, GDUs are not hard to come by out here. So with timely rains, very high soybean and corn yields are highly achievable. We see a lot of 200 plus bushel acre corn out here, 60 plus bushel acre soybeans. I've seen as high as 280, 300 bushel corn. I've seen over 100 bushel beans out here. So that was just a really interesting thing for me coming from an area where if you got 170, 180 bushel corn, that was a great year. And 50 bushel beans, you were having a great year on the soybean side of things, where out here they expect those higher yields, and then anything on top of that is what they're really chasing. So typically, I think a lot of the seed salesmen can relate to me on this. When you get a grower call, it's usually not a good call. Well, out here, I get pictures, phone calls of these, yield monitors that are just through the roof. And that's when this job is the most fun.
Hart, just curious, I guess, are many of the acres out there, you talk about corn for silage, I don't know, is that irrigated ground? Is it all dry land? Or is there a mix?
Sure. I would say most of the ground out here is going to be dry land. There are some pivots around, but those are typically going for some more specialty crops. And like I said, with the amount of rain that we have seen, at least last year in my time, there was no shortage of it. I know Maryland was a little dry last year, but Pennsylvania and New York had excellent yields given the year.
So let's talk a little bit about what farming is like in your area. I guess I'm curious, just from an overall perspective, as you talk to customers, what are the challenges that they face in that part of the world that are kind of present of mind for them?
So I think that conversation can kind of go one of two ways. I'll talk from a maybe land perspective first, and then I'll dive into some of the actual in-crop issues that I've seen out here. So, of course, being on the East Coast with some of the major cities and growing urban areas, you're seeing a lot of land each year get taken out of production and put into urban development. So each year, we're not making any more farm ground. It's actually going away. So with that, we need to figure out, hey, how can we push the boundary on yield and make up for maybe some of that lost ground. So on the land side of things, I would say, losing ground to urban development has been a main concern for a lot of growers out here. And then on maybe the pest or disease side of things, this year, we are seeing a major issue with slugs, especially in those higher residue fields. So that's been a kind of a challenge all spring with some of the cooler, wetter weather, higher residue. Slugs have been a pain in the butt for a lot of guys out here. And then last year, with kind of the smoke that we had from the Canadian wildfires, the plentiful rain, white mold really showed its face up in New York. So
sort of the counterpoint to what we just talked about. We've got challenges that they face, things that concern them, that maybe keep them up at night. I guess what do they see as the opportunities going forward that maybe they're actually somewhat excited about or maybe even looking forward to? Is there anything in the area that gets farmers feeling good about or optimistic about what's coming?
I would say I fielded a lot of calls from guys that have a real interest in the shorter stature corn. That's gotten guys excited. Figuring out how to reduce the biomass, maybe as the water usage in their crops, because not every year is going to be a garden year where you get the timely rains and the perfect weather to grow those high yielding crops. So they're looking at alternatives for hey, what can we do different in our farming practices. So that's something that I've heard a lot of out here. A lot of guys are really looking forward to. I think as more and more companies are starting to talk about shorter statured corn, it's really getting that conversation started. And I'm, with Stine being the leader in bringing short corn to the market, I think we're well positioned to deliver those options to those growers who are interested in it.
So kind of bridging off of that, I guess another question I had is, again, in your part of the world, it's not that we're brand new, but we certainly have, as a brand, Stine brand maybe hasn't been in the region as long there as let's say, in the heart of the Midwest. I'm curious how, as you get out and about, how have growers responded to this new presence of Stine brand in your area?
I would say overall, when I'm out with my reps and growers, we're really well received. I think the by farmers for farmers message that Stine has for people and what we're bringing to them, they've received us really well. I think the family-owned company resonates really well with all these guys.
So thinking about, we just talked about opportunities and challenges that your growers in the region face. I guess when you think about that, how do you think Stine can help those growers in your region prepare to meet those future opportunities and challenges?
Yeah. So this year we're, throughout Region 28, we have what we call corn and soybean product development plots. So we're continuously looking throughout the season at, the new products that we're thinking about bringing into the lineup and how those fit into some of the areas that we're in.
I like where you're going with that. I mean, we've talked about the PDP plots, I don't know, in probably every one of the last 2 or 3 podcasts, that topic has come up. So people who do listen will understand if you're talking about PDPs, they probably have heard that term before.
So with those PDP plots and the knowledge we're gaining from those, we're also doing grower meetings, which, we bring a group of guys in. We have either myself or an agronomist along, and hey, we'll bring you in, feed you some lunch, and we can learn about the products that Stine is bringing to the market. So between those two things, that's really getting guys excited for what's to come with what Stine's already having brought to them, plus what's in the future, and like I had talked earlier on the short corn thing, we're going to be looking at quite a few hybrids that fit into that shorter stature corn. So I'm really excited this summer to get out and look at those with the growers in our area.
Well, so Hart, as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, I guess in closing, I was just curious, as we talked about at the outset, you're out on the East Coast working for Stine. You're maybe not necessarily from around there. So I was curious if there's anything that sticks in your mind, any memorable moments or stories or experiences you've found as you get out and talk to growers that helped you shape your understanding of how farming works out on the Eastern Coast.
Yeah, I know I kind of mentioned this earlier, but just the farming practices that growers are doing out here with reduced tillage, conservation tillage, has really been eye-opening to me that, hey, this does work. But there's also things that we need to be looking for in terms of our product line to go into some of those practices. So, we're looking heavily now at like cold score emergences with Stine, which is something that, hey, I really didn't have to worry about back where I was selling, because a lot of our acres were tilled and they were ready to go when the time was right. We're out here, we're having to be a little more cautious about some of maybe the different varieties or hybrids we're placing with these growers, which is great because I think that helps myself and our team really dive into more of the product knowledge side of things. And then my other thing would be the size of fields out here has been really interesting. I give some of these guys credit, man. They're dealing with a lot smaller field size than maybe we're used to out in the Midwest. So when you're talking about farming a few thousand acres, you got a lot to keep track of. And it just impresses me when guys tell me kind of their cropping plans and practices, because, yeah, it's a lot.
That's awesome. Well, Hart, I tell you what, I appreciate you being on the podcast today and helping us learn more about corn and soybean production out on the East Coast. I know it's a growth area for us. We're excited to have a presence there. We're excited for the work that you and your team are doing out there, and really appreciate everything you've done to share with us your story on the podcast today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, David, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, that's our time for today. I want to thank our guests and our listeners for joining us on another episode of the Stine Seedcast. We'll be back again soon with more expert interviews and insights about all things Stine. If you have a question for our Stine experts, send it to us at asktheseedcast@stineseed.com. That's asktheseedcast@stineseed.com. And to never miss an episode, subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found.
Subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found. To learn more about Stine and its elite corn and soybean genetics, visit stineseed.com. Stine has yield.